This week, I'd like to talk with you about a concept that isn't real. And that concept is white Jesus. White Jesus. When I think back to my Sunday school days in church and the pictures we would have of Jesus, or even a lot of the famous artwork, the Last Supper, we're looking at Jesus and his disciples, or Jesus and the little children, Jesus feeding the 5,000. And it's all these group of white people that you might find in England, or you might find in New York out in the country. And we made Jesus and all of our Bible stories about white people. And it's kind of weird, because if we're looking at the people, and I did collect some data here. Contained in the Bible, there are 3,237 characters that are named in the Bible. Now, there's more than 3,000 people in the Bible, because we know Jesus feeds the 5,000. Well, there's another 5,000 people. But characters, people that are named in the Bible, there are 3,237. Now, within that, we know there are some people that have the same name, like there's this John and that John, and there's just this James and this James and this James, and there's the story of Jonah and the fish. But we also know that Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, their dad's name was Jonah. So, but those were separate Jonahs. So those are separate characters. So this number, 3,037 characters named in the Bible. Not one of them would we classify as a white person. Now, I'm using terms that we use today. They did not use terms like that. What they did was people were named by their tribes and their nations. People back then describing people by the color of their skin would be like us today describing and categorizing people by the color of their hair. Okay? So back then they didn't say, uh, 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 that white person over there, or that olive skinned person over there, or that dark skinned person over there, or that black person there. They didn't use white, black, Hispanic. They didn't use words like that back then. People were attributed and grouped according to their tribe and according to their nations. Okay, so they wouldn't have talked about white people, but it's important for us to know and understand, with today's understanding of how we categorize and group and talk about people today, and how we discriminate against people today. We do categorize people by the color of their skin or their ethnicity. It's probably not right that we do that, but that is uh, part of what we do, and probably the root of a lot of the bad things we do. And actually, if you study the beginnings of talking about the races or the ethnicities of people, race and ethnicity are not really synonyms, but we kind of use them that way. Uh, it eventually did lead to prejudice and discrimination, and valuing uh, paler skin over darker skin, and subjugating it, and uh, creating slavery and all the bad things that came from that. But in doing that, indoctrinating and thinking about, well, Jesus and them disciples had to be like me. And the people saying that, the me's, were the people that were doing all the writing and all of the painting and all of the illustrating, and they were making all of their religious art match them. And that's where we got this idea of white Jesus and white Mary and white Joseph and the white disciples and the white apostle Paul and all of these things. And we get to the place now that it's even invaded, it's probably the root of it, of our social political organizations. And the people with the power and the money work to make sure the right people are in power and the right people have the money. And it's still very much rooted in the color of skin. And so we have these groups of people that consider themselves Christians and they're God's chosen people and they're white and God loves us white people better than others. There are really people that really believe that. And if you start talking, having a conversation with them about, well, Jesus wasn't white, they get really upset. And even in social media and people sharing these nice little memes and things of Jesus with his strawberry blonde hair and light colored eyes and uh, tall and nice cut abs on all these pictures. It's like that's really not the way it is. And we can know that mentally, but when you start seeing artwork that is from a different perspective, and then just kind of sit quietly in the room and listen to people complain about why do they have all them disciples with curly hair and dark skin? And then you thought, you want all the blonde headed disciples picture here that you've seen for years and you love that? It's probably framed and hanging on the wall in your house somewhere. So if we really want to look at the people that we encounter in the Bible, we're talking about people from Middle Eastern communities. When you get into the New Testament, you get some of the Greek and the Roman communities, which still would have been Mediterranean people. Not what we would classify as white people, like we see in a lot of the artwork we have. So we really need to start reevaluating our thinking and our thoughts about race and ethnicity and our elevation of Jesus and the disciples to make them as white appearing as possible, and know and understand that distorts our perceptions when we're flooded by all of this Anglo-centric artwork, images, and ideas about these 3,237 characters that we find in the Bible. Because there are no white people in the Bible. You heard me, right? There are no white people in the Bible. So when we see our politicians and sometimes even our spiritual leaders uh, elevating one particular group of race, specifically white people, as the preferred, the white nationalists that are calling themselves Christians. You know, the Ku Klux Klan said they were carrying out the work of God. No, 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 no. Uh, I've written more on white Jesus in my book here. Sometimes you have to stir the pot. So if you would like to explore that a little more, there are a few pages written on that. I'm not going to push those on right now. My main point today is just bring up the idea that out of the 3,237 characters that are named in the Bible, one of them was a white person. And Jesus didn't have strawberry blonde hair and blue or green eyes. That would not have made sense. If Jesus did look like that, he would have stood out amongst the group of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern descendants of the people in that area. So, where did all the people from all these different ethnicities and races come from? Well, that's a conversation for a whole other time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this type of conversation and thought-provoking, if I'm stirring your brain a little bit, or we're stirring the pots just a little bit, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Catch you on the next one.